Training about refeeds. Refeeds are a strategy that you can use during fat loss. And if you don't know how to properly go through a fat loss phase, if you don't even know what I'm talking about, and you've done traditional dieting and you haven't looked at my other stuff, I encourage you to listen to this and watch this, but then go back into the Facebook community, the Wits and Weights group, go under guides and look at the free trainings that we have. There are quite a few there that describe the entire process. So the purpose of today's strategy with refeeds, and as you can see, I have no slides, I have an old-fashioned whiteboard, is to allow you to get through a fat loss phase successfully and consistently. Because one of the biggest struggles that I see with clients and with others is the level of fatigue, the mental challenges, and sometimes the issues with performance, with energy, and all of those things that come with fat loss. Okay. So I'm going to define refeeds, and then I'm going to go through 4 different aspects of refeed so you know exactly what to do from top to bottom. So the 4 things we're going to cover today are the mistakes and misconceptions that people make. Okay, I see these all the time. I want to clarify them, get them out of the way, what refeeds are for, what they're not for. The second thing is strategy. What are the 3 different elements that you can do at home? This is an exercise for you to figure out exactly how you would like to implement refeed days, if you need them at all. So we'll talk about that. The third area is the phases of fat loss. So as we go along fat loss, there's different needs and reasons for using refeeds. And then finally, we'll talk about metrics that you can track and how to optimize them. Okay. So I want to define what a refeed is if you've never heard of it before. You might be able to tell from the word itself, refeed, you are feeding yourself again. But really what it is a strategically planned day. All right. So planned, it's a strategically planned day during fat loss to increase carbs. Okay, this is key, carbohydrates. Okay, you're increasing calories and carbs for psychological relief and possibly increased performance. So I'm going to repeat that again. A refeed is a strategically planned day during fat loss to increase carbs for psychological relief and possibly increased performance on training days. So we're going to jump into the first section today, which is 5 mistakes that people make that I see all the time. I'm going to write them on the I'm going to write them on the whiteboard as I go through them. So the first mistake people have is thinking that a refeed will reduce your metabolic adaptation or jumpstart your metabolism. Okay, so there is a lot of misinformation about the use of refeeds for your metabolism. So when you go into a fat loss phase, as you're losing body mass and as you're moving less, and as your body tries to preserve its energy, your metabolism decreases. This happens to everybody, okay? Depending on your energy levels, your activity levels, how much you're eating, and so on. And part of this process is metabolic adaptation. That is, your body just adapts as you get smaller and as you move less. And there's nothing we can do about it. So sorry to say there's nothing we can do about it. The only thing you could do long-term is have more muscle mass. And the only thing you do short-term is offset the metabolic adaptation by moving more, usually by walking or some cardio. Okay. But you cannot, if you take a refeed, so if you take a strategically planned higher carb day for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, even a week or 2, your metabolism might recover during that time you're taking the refeed, but it's going to go right back to where it was. There's no way to shift it up, right? Or to fix your metabolism or restore it to some higher number so that when you continue fat loss, it's somehow easier calorie-wise. So that's a big misconception. All right. The second one, and by the way, if you have questions on this, throw it in the chat. The second one is thinking of refeeds as cheat days. Okay, so cheat days, which I can't stand the phrase, I never use it in my practice. The idea of cheating is losing control, is saying that I'm just going to eat whatever I want. I'm not going to track. I'm not going to think about it. I'm just going to go hog wild instead of planning a deviation. So there's actually a term called planned deviation or planned hedonic deviation, if you want to get technical. Hedonic meaning hedonism, like you get to enjoy yourself and indulge, but it's planned, okay? And we are doing them again to mitigate the mental side of dieting, which usually has to do with hunger and being on low calories for days and weeks on end. Okay, but they are not cheat days. They are planned, strategically planned. The third mistake or misconception that people have is that they change their diet. I'll say different foods, for lack of a more elegant way to put it. They change the foods that they eat on these refeed days. They choose calorie dense or highly processed foods instead of just scaling up the foods that they're already eating, primarily the carbs. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit later about food choice and food selection. But this is a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they have a refeed. Oh, hey, Christina, I'm just going to mute you. Is they go through a refeed and they're like, all right, I'm just going to eat all the junk food that I've been missing out. Now, there's definitely a place for a little bit of indulgence on a refeed day for sure, but it's got to be strategic. All right, number 4. Overeating. I don't even know if you guys can read my handwriting, but there you go. Overeating during refeed days, which means going past your maintenance calories. So we're going to talk about how to implement a refeed day, but the idea isn't, again, a cheat day where you just go hog wild. It's strategically planned, and it's to a controlled level, going from a deficit up to maintenance. The last mistake that people make, and this is actually very important, is they don't, so not adjusting. Okay, they don't change their refeed days with their goals. People always want to be told what to do and have a prescription, and this is how you do a refeed day, but it's going to depend. So I have 2 stories of clients. The first client, she had a very long, successful fat loss phase. And I say long because she had extra weight to lose. So it was a little bit longer than the typical 12 to 16 weeks, but she was doing great. And then all of a sudden, one time she said, you know what? I'm kind of going crazy here because every time I get to a weekend, I feel like I have to have just complete discipline and willpower to get through it and hit my numbers. And I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want you to feel like it requires everything in your power in terms of discipline and willpower to do that. And I said, well, why don't we just shift some calories to the weekend, right? Your everyday routine is pretty boring and consistent, and you're working, so you don't think about it. But your weekends are the time when you go out to eat. You go out with family and friends. You want to have a little alcohol, maybe. You want to have an indulgence or two. You know, there's room for these things, even in a fat loss phase, at least the way that I like to do it with clients. And we said, let's just shift your calories. And she did. And she was blown away that such a simple change could all of a sudden unlock her mental game when it came to fat loss, because then she now could eat more on the weekend. She felt renewed. She felt like she had energy. She could look forward to the weekend, not in the way that you look forward to a cheat day, like that's all you think about, but more like, hey, I know the weekend's coming and I'm going to be able to accommodate my lifestyle, and then we'll get back to our routine and we'll alternate back and forth while continuing to stay in a deficit for her fat loss phase. So she adjusted by adding refeeds. I have another client who started with refeeds right off the bat, right? So the weekends were higher than the weekdays. In fact, I think it was like Fridays and Saturdays. But this client did not need them. So, not only that, he didn't need them, and they actually threw off his ability to be consistent. So what we did is we said, let's just make them even across the board, get rid of the refeed, make the progress go a little faster. And what happened is he ended up getting into a nice routine where the weekends were no different than the weekdays, and that actually helped him. So again, we all respond differently. So these are the mistakes that people make using refeeds. All right, so now how do we actually use them? And this is where we get into strategy. So you can do this on your own. You can create a simple table with 3 columns, okay? And you're going to use 3 labels. Timing. I hope you can hear me with my microphone. Timing, food, and the last one is strategy. Okay, getting used to this whiteboard and where everything is placed here. So timing, here's what I want you to think about. So the question I often get is, when do I do a refeed? Do I do it on the weekends? Do I do it for a whole week?